Some people think robbing an illegal gambling spot is a good idea, like it's just sitting there, full of cash, no cops around. Basically an easy buck that isn't even near comparable to robbing an actual casino. Well, let me tell you about 3 geniuses from New Jersey who decided to put that theory to the test. Brian Castro, Charles Powell, and a man ironically named Musa Coward drove from Patterson and Newark to Brooklyn in October 2020 to rob a hood casino ironically called the G-Spot. They had inside information, guns, and a plan. What they didn't have was any idea that the 58-year-old security guard working that night had just survived COVID and wasn't about to let some out-of-town robbers ruin his shift. And they definitely didn't account for Castro getting high and bragging about the whole thing to an FBI informant. This is the story of when robbing a hood casino goes spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. Musa Coward had connections in Brownsville, Brooklyn. He also had a side hustle selling guns and a history of robbing people. In October 2020, Coward got a tip from his cousin about an illegal gambling den called the G-Spot on Hedgeman Avenue. Someone had just lost $50,000 at the spot and was supposedly coming back with another $20,000 to keep gambling. Easy money, right? Coward recruited 3 guys from New Jersey for the job. Brian Castro, who went by Morinai, Charles Powell from Newark, who went by Payback and already had a felony conviction for weapon possession, and a 4th guy named Shamel Myhand, who later became the government's star witness. Coward frequently sold drugs with Powell and Castro at a gas station across from his house in Patterson, so they knew each other well. And according to a cooperating witness, Coward had robbed this same gambling spot before, along with a residence and a dice game, all within the previous 4 years. This wasn't his first rodeo. On October 7, 2020, Coward drove the crew from New Jersey to Brooklyn in a Honda Civic. The plan was simple. Coward would park around the corner and wait in the car while the other 3 went inside and robbed the place. They were looking for a quick lick, as Castro would later call it. The G-Spot had a front room facing Hedgeman Avenue, an inner room where people played cards, craps, and dominoes, and a backyard patio. That night, Rodney Maxwell was working security. Maxwell was 58 years old, a father of 3, and a longtime employee at Bellevue Hospital. He was moonlighting as a bouncer to make extra money. 7 months earlier, he'd survived a week-long battle with COVID during the terrifying early days of the pandemic in March 2020. He'd fought through that nightmare and came out the other side. Now he was just trying to pay the bills. Powell, Castro, and Myhand walked around the corner and entered the gambling den single file. Powell went in first, followed by Castro, then Myhand. They stormed through the front room and the inner room toward the back patio where people were betting on CeeLo and shooting pool. But Maxwell saw Myhand was armed and immediately jumped into action. He tried to disarm Myhand and they started fighting. Maxwell got Myhand in a wrestling hold and was trying to take his gun. They struggled from the inner room all the way to the front room, which had a surveillance camera. Myhand kept pulling the trigger, but his gun jammed. Maxwell had him pinned down. That's when Castro rushed in. He shot Maxwell once in the back with a 9mm pistol, but the shot didn't stop Maxwell. He kept fighting. He kinda had me pinned down at the time, and he fell on top of me, Myhand testified later, and he was trying to take my gun again out of my hand, and I started pressing the trigger again. And eventually the gun went off and the bullet hit the floor and hit the wall after the floor. Meanwhile, people in the patio were fleeing in terror. Powell, seeing the chaos, started firing indiscriminately into the crowd of people trying to escape into the backyard. He hit 3 men with his .380 caliber pistol. All 3 survived their wounds, but Powell was just spraying bullets at terrified bystanders. Maxwell was still fighting Myhand on the ground, so Powell ran back into the front room and shot Maxwell once in the chest with his .380. That was the shot that ended it. Maxwell fell, and Myhand scrambled up and ran out the door. Castro's gun had jammed during the shooting, which he'd later complain about. Powell and Castro ran back to the Honda Civic where Coward was waiting. Myhand took off running in a different direction, making his way to the Newport Gardens apartments where he used to live. They left Maxwell bleeding out on the floor, and he died from his gunshot wounds. The 3 other victims survived.
An Eyewitness News exclusive and video showing 3 people entering an illegal gambling spot last week to rob the players. Suddenly, 2 of the suspects began shooting wildly. 1 person was killed and more were injured. Eyewitness News reporter Josh Einiger talking with the NYPD tonight about the search to find the killers.
It's an unmistakable sign, a universal symbol of loss. Tonight on Hedgeman Avenue in Brownsville, a man tended to a sea of candles in memory of a friend lost to guns.
I'm just lighting the candles because, I just feel like hopefully that he's in a better place.
This ramshackle building seems like the last place you'd expect to find a lot of cash, but cops say the illegal gambling going on in the back made it a prime target for violence.
Certainly an act like this, even for Brownsville, Brooklyn in 2020, is highly unusual. It's highly unusual.
Things have been busy lately for Michael Kemper, the chief of the NYPD's Brooklyn North Detectives, but this case, he says, has been especially tough to crack. It happened late last Wednesday night. In video obtained exclusively by Eyewitness News, you can see the three suspects enter through the trash-strewn storefront and make their way to the back, where they tried to rob the players inside. Two of the suspects opened fire. In the end, 4 people had been hit, one of whom, 58-year-old Rodney Maxwell, did not survive.
Myhand said he pocketed $1,200 during the robbery, but told his accomplices he only got $800. Quote, "Because I felt they left me." He gave Coward $400. Castro later told his FBI informant friend that the crew got $20,000 total and they broke bread between them, with Castro keeping $5,800 for himself. Now here's where these geniuses really fucked up. More than a month after the murder, Castro was smoking weed in a car with an acquaintance. He started bragging about the robbery, called it a lick, said his crew got $20,000, described how he shot Maxwell, and even mimicked the dying sounds Maxwell made when he was shot. Turns out the acquaintance was an FBI confidential informant, and he was recording the entire conversation. In the recording, Castro said, quote, "So I'm hanging the strap on the wall, and that shit's jamming on me. That's why Red sold it." Red was Coward's nickname. Castro was complaining that his gun jammed during the murder and that Coward sold the gun afterward. The recording captured Castro mocking Maxwell's final moments and bragging about the thousands of dollars they stole. In April 2021, a Patterson police detective working with a federal gang task force was looking at surveillance photos from the robbery. He recognized Powell and Castro. That led to Powell's arrest in October 2021 after Powell got into a car crash in Clifton, New Jersey. When police arrested him, they found 3 .380 caliber cartridges that matched the shots fired at the gambling spot. Castro and Coward were indicted and arrested in March 2023. Myhand agreed to cooperate with the government and testify against his former crew. Powell's attorney, Murray Singer, tried to argue that Castro's recorded confession was just bluster meant to boost his street cred. His defense was basically that if the robbery had failed, it would have been humiliating for Castro, so he was just lying to look cool when he confessed to murder on tape. The jury didn't buy it. The trial started in January 2025 in Brooklyn Federal Court before Judge Eric R. Comity. It lasted 2 weeks. The jury saw the surveillance video of the robbery and shooting. They heard cell tower records proving the suspects were in Brooklyn that night. They heard Myhand's testimony about the whole operation, and they heard Castro's recorded confession where he bragged about the murder and mocked Maxwell's dying sounds. On January 30th, 2025, the jury convicted all 3 men on 4 counts. All 3 face a mandatory minimum of 10 years in prison and a maximum of life. Maxwell's daughter, Revan Maxwell, spoke to reporters after the verdict. "I'm just happy they're off the streets to never do this again to anybody else's family," she said. "This won't bring my father back. I'm just happy this won't happen to anybody else." So to recap, Coward got a tip about a gambling den, recruited 3 incompetent guys to rob it, drove them from New Jersey to Brooklyn, and waited in the car while they went inside. Maxwell, a 58-year-old hospital employee and father of 3, who'd survived COVID, tried to stop the robbery. He fought like hell even after being shot in the back. Powell and Castro shot him dead and wounded 3 random bystanders. They made off with a few $1,000s, definitely not enough to justify the risk of a life sentence. Then Castro got high and bragged about it to an FBI informant who recorded everything. They all got caught, tried, and convicted. The moral of the story? Don't rob illegal gambling dens, and if you do, definitely don't brag about murdering someone to your weed-smoking buddy who turns out to be a federal informant. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. I'll see y'all next week.